All right, I have a new Substack essay out. This one is on the first four short stories of the very great horror fiction writer H.P. Lovecraft, one of my all-time favorite writers, and definitely my favorite horror fiction writer of all time. And so I'm doing a series on Substack where on the mythology of horror. But what I'm basically doing is writing chapters for a book. And so if you subscribe to my Substack, which is $5 a month, $80 a year, what you will see on there is the gradual process of me assembling a book bit by bit, rewriting it, reshaping the essays. And so this is a kind of experiment. The first time I've ever done this is writing a book live and sharing it with an audience, which is very interesting and fun. So H.P. Lovecraft, this is him here, the maestro. Let's take a look at him. This is him and his signature, some family pictures and so forth. The house he lived in. Lovecraft was kind of a loner. So he was born in 1890 and died at the age of 46 in 1937. Spent his entire life in Providence, Rhode Island, with the exception of maybe a year or two in New York City. And he was married for about that length of time, just to a literary woman, just for about a year. And that was it for him for women. One does not get the sense that Lovecraft was very fond of women. They don't appear in his fiction hardly at all. In fact, I can't think of a single important female protagonist anywhere in his works. Okay, so let's take a look at his chart here. So this is his astrological chart, which I think is pretty amazing. It suits him to a T. The first thing I noticed was that he has Sun conjunct Saturn. Saturn darkens anything that it gets near. The sun in astrology is the ego, basically the waking daylight consciousness, your personality, in other words. And Saturn has to do with the old man, the authority figure, sort of the king in a bad mood, let's say, whereas Jupiter is the king in a jovial mood. And a person with Saturn conjunct Sun might be a person very much interested in old things. And we do find, and this Substack essay right now that I have up analyzes his first four short stories that he wrote from the age of 14 to 27 between the years of 1904 to 1917. And in those stories, the first one is The Beast in the Cave, and then that is followed by The Alchemist, and then The Tomb, and then Dagon. And already all of the themes are announced in Nuke there, in those stories that unfold throughout the course of his entire oeuvre. And the creepy old man does indeed figure already in those stories, in The Alchemist in particular, in that batch. The creepy old man, wizard, madman, alchemist type figure, and the love of old things, old places, ruins, decaying things. That's all Saturn. Saturn conjunct Sun there, and it is squaring a very interesting combination here, which is Pluto conjunct Neptune. Neptune has to do with the transpersonal, with the archetypal, with the mythological, the spiritual, all of that. Pluto has to do with the underworld. It's very dark, powerful energy. And when you put these two together, this tends to code for an interest in the occult. And so this suits, these are the monsters right here. This is Neptune, Pluto, monsters coming up out of the underworld. Pluto has to do with the underworld. And always we see, as I point out in these first four essays, especially, or short stories, especially the one Dagon, the monsters are already, in Lovecraft, they all come up from below. They're coming from somewhere. And in the essay, I tell you where it is that I think they're coming from. Not just something stupid like, from the depths of his imagination. It's much more complex than that. And then, so this is trining over here Jupiter, which expands, whereas Saturn contracts anything it gets near, Jupiter expands. It's expansive and beneficent, so it's actually expanding this interest in the occult. And then, okay, so Jupiter over here is trining in the other direction Venus. Venus has to do with the love of beautiful things, and most artists usually do have Venus significantly aspected. Artists and writers, whatever, musicians, doesn't matter. Venus has to do with the arts and the love of beauty and aesthetics, and it's sitting right on his ascendant, which has to do with the personality, sort of similar to the sun, whereas the sun is more the sort of core personality, the ascendant is more the ego, strictly. So Venus is sitting on it, and it too is trining and aspecting over here the Pluto-Neptune. So it's coming in through his riding here, and he's got Moon just about sitting on the ascendant as well. Writers very often have the Moon on the ascendant, as I do in my chart, as Nietzsche does as well in his. And Uranus, he has Uranus conjunct Moon, and Moon has to do with emotions. And with Uranus is a planet that has to do with breakthroughs, but it also can destabilize anything that it gets near. So it on the Moon can cause weird mood swings, and this may code for all the intense anxieties and fears that the characters in his fiction experience. And then, let's see, and then the Venus over here is sextile. Lilith I don't bother with, it's an asteroid. Asteroids are ridiculous to have in astrology. But let's see, the Uranus Moon is sextile the Sun, which is conjunct Saturn. So all of that is coming through the personality. But mainly, the main thing here is the Pluto, Neptune, and the Sun and Saturn really stand out the most. And let's see, Pluto, Neptune is in direct opposition to Mars, which again, Mars is the principle of vitality, courage on the one hand, aggression on the other, but definitely forms of energy and vitality. So he's got a lot of energy here to accomplish this life's task of unfolding structural transformations in the astral plane of New England. And so Lovecraft is, like Stephen King, very much embedded in the astral plane of New England. And they are both preceded by Nathaniel Hawthorne, whose work I want to look at as well. And also then to the south, Edgar Allan Poe. So these are the basic four architects of horror fiction, at least at its foundations. And I realize there are also other characters. E.T.A. Hoffmann over in Germany, whom Poe read, is another very significant character in the foundations of horror. And of course, Mary Shelley and Bram Stoker. All right, so check out my essay on Substack. There will be a bunch more essays on all of these writers as I worm my way through this great tradition, the New England and Southern horror tradition. See you on Substack.